Robert De Niro had played 100 roles in his lifetime, mobsters, mentors, fathers, fighters, but nothing prepared him for this one, sitting on a cold courtroom bench, tears in his eyes, as a nation watched him, not as a movie star, but as a man. It began, as such stories often do, with something seemingly small. A comment. An interview. A sentence uttered by Caroline Leavitt, a rising political voice known for her sharp tongue and blunt takes. Hollywood elites don't care about America's forgotten, she said, her gaze pointed but her tone casual. They're actors, pretenders. They don't live the stories they sell. Most brushed it off. But something about it hit Robert differently. Maybe it was the tiredness in his bones after decades of playing other people. Maybe it was the quiet ache he carried for the country he loved and the people he once walked among before the cameras followed him. Whatever it was, the words didn't just sting, they pierced. The very next morning, Robert was seen, without entourage or announcement, on the gritty streets of Newark, New Jersey, where his father had once painted murals and his mother had walked him to school in shoes a little too worn. There was no film crew. No script. Just De Niro, in a thrifted coat, walking the blocks most famous names avoid. That's where he met Ray. Ray was 58, with skin weathered by years of sun and sorrow. His cart, filled with crushed bottles and newspapers from the early 2000s, was parked outside a shuttered diner. Robert approached quietly, unsure what he was looking for, redemption, perhaps. Or just truth. You look familiar, Ray said, squinting. Robert nodded. I've been on TV. A lot. Ray smiled. Yeah, you played that guy who was always yelling. You do that good. Robert chuckled, then sat beside him on the curb. They talked for hours. About the war, Ray served in Desert Storm. About Broadway, Robert's first love. About loneliness, loss, and the terrifying weight of being forgotten. That night, Robert didn't return to his hotel. He stayed in a church shelter where Ray usually slept, sharing a thin blanket and thicker silence. It wasn't a publicity stunt. In fact, no one even knew, until a local volunteer snapped a photo and it went viral. The media exploded. De Niro goes homeless for justice. Is this performance or penitence? Caroline Leavitt responds, this is just Hollywood theater. That last headline hit hardest. Caroline had doubled down, suggesting Robert was using Ray for a PR boost. That's when Robert made the choice that changed everything. He filed a civil defamation suit. Not for money, but for truth. And to everyone's surprise, he said he had receipts. It was the first day of the trial, and the courtroom buzzed with curiosity. Celebrities rarely sued for defamation, at least not like this. Not in a modest New Jersey courthouse, where water stains marked the ceiling tiles and the scent of stale coffee hung in the air. But Robert De Niro wasn't there for drama. He was there for dignity. Caroline Leavitt entered the room flanked by sharp-suited lawyers, her face calm, her eyes steeled. Her defense was clear, the comment was opinion, protected under free speech. This is a political stunt, her lead attorney declared. A Hollywood actor trying to stay relevant. But Robert wasn't alone. Sitting quietly in the second row, hands folded in his lap, was Ray, now shaved, in a borrowed blazer, and watching his friend with unblinking loyalty. When Robert took the stand, the room held its breath. He didn't start with anger or accusation. He started with a story. I met Ray 3 weeks ago, he began, voice low, gravelly as ever. Not because I wanted to prove something. I was restless. I was haunted by the idea that maybe I hadn't done enough. He paused. Looked at Ray. You see, actors like me, we tell stories. But Ray lived one I had never dared to imagine. So I listened. And then I wrote. From his coat pocket, Robert pulled out a thick manila envelope and placed it gently on the witness stand. These, he said, are the receipts. The room stirred. What followed wasn't what anyone expected. The receipts weren't bank statements or recordings. They were handwritten pages, stories, interviews, reflections. Ray's war letters, copied by Robert's hand. Testimonies from shelter workers. Notes from families who had lost loved ones to homelessness, now reconnected through Ray's referrals. One letter, dated just a week earlier, was from a mother in Brooklyn. My son had disappeared for 6 years. We thought he was dead. Ray found him sleeping behind an old church in Queens and gave him my phone number. We're talking again now. We owe our reunion to him, and to the man who listened to him. The courtroom fell silent. Robert continued, Ms. Levitt said I didn't care about the forgotten. But I'm not here to defend my fame. I'm here to defend the idea that nobody is beyond being heard. Then, the surprise, Robert pulled up an audio file on his phone. With the judge's permission, it played through the room's old speakers. It was a recording of Ray, his voice cracked but determined. You know, I've seen people turn away from me like I was invisible. But that guy. De Niro, he sat down. He listened. And not just to me. To all of us. That matters. It really matters. Caroline looked shaken. Not because of fear, but perhaps for the first time, she saw that this wasn't about politics anymore. It was about humanity. The final day of the trial began not with cameras or chaos, but with a stillness that felt sacred. The courthouse, now filled beyond capacity, wasn't hosting a legal showdown anymore. It was witnessing something else, a reckoning of conscience. The judge, a woman in her early 60s with silver curls and wise eyes, took her seat and motioned for quiet. The legal arguments had been made. The documents submitted. The statements heard. What remained was something less tangible, something deeper. Caroline Levitt was asked if she'd like to make a final statement. She stood slowly. I didn't expect this to go this far, she began. And I won't pretend I came here today as the most humble version of myself. I said what I said because I believed it. But I've watched a man of status give up comfort to sit beside the most forgotten among us. I've watched him turn pain into purpose. She looked at Ray. And I've seen how wrong I was about what compassion looks like. Then, to everyone's astonishment, she walked across the courtroom and offered Ray her hand. Ray looked stunned. But after a beat, he took it. I'm sorry, she said, just loud enough for the room to hear. That simple gesture was met with murmurs, then applause. The judge called for order but didn't hide the smile forming at the corners of her mouth. Robert rose, clearing his throat. I didn't file this suit for an apology. I filed it so that the real heroes, like Ray, could be seen. I've played too many roles. I wanted to play none for once. Just, be human. The judge gave her verdict, no damages awarded, but a statement entered into public record affirming the importance of ethical speech in media. More importantly, she said. What happened here is bigger than legal victory. It is a lesson in listening. Outside the courthouse, cameras swarmed. But this time, Robert didn't speak. He handed the microphone to Ray. And Ray, in his deep, shaky voice, said something the world wouldn't forget. We don't need more speeches. We need more chairs on the curb. Where people can sit down. Together. That single line was replayed across networks, etched on social media, and even quoted by a senator the next week during a bill signing for homeless veteran support. But the story didn't end in headlines. 2 months later, a new foundation launched, the Ray Initiative, co-founded by Robert and Ray himself. Its mission? To build community-led support programs for the unhoused and create documentary-style storytelling hubs where forgotten voices could be heard. Caroline Levitt made the surprise announcement that she'd be working with them, using her platform to promote bipartisan efforts to address homelessness. Critics called it a pivot. Supporters called it growth. Ray just called it a second chance for everyone. The night before the first Ray Initiative shelter opened in Newark, Robert sat on the same curb where he'd met Ray. This time, they were joined by a crowd, some formerly homeless, some local volunteers, others who just came to feel part of something real. Robert turned to Ray. "Still think I play the yelling guy best?" Ray laughed. "Nah. I think you just found your best role." They sat there quietly, no script between them. Just two men, once strangers, now brothers by choice and change. Above them, the neon sign flickered on. "You're not forgotten." Final message. This story isn't about fame or politics. It's about presence. About showing up when it's easier to scroll past. It's about risking reputation to restore dignity. And most of all, it's about the enduring truth that the most powerful thing we can give one another, is to truly see each other. And that's what makes us human. Moral of the story. True humanity is not measured by fame, power, or status, but by the willingness to listen, to empathize, and to stand beside those society forgets. Sometimes, the most powerful change begins when we sit down, not to speak, but to truly hear one another.